I'm Ed Fuquay, Young Adult Librarian at Woonsocket Harris Public Library, and this is my socially distant sidekick.
Hi, I'm Miss Gabby.
We may be socially distant, but we're united in our love of a particular character we're going to talk about today, Harley Quinn.
Oh, I love her. I've been obsessed with her since maybe 9, 10 years old. I remember reading comic books and seeing her in video games and everything, and I just was fascinated with the history of her. It's great.
What do you like about her most?
I don't know. I would say just the craziness, because she has just a perfect amount of cute but crazy. But at the same time though, she can go a little dramatic, which is
Yeah.
But she's just a good comic relief kind of in some sort.
She is. There's several different versions of her, which we'll get to in a few minutes.
Okay.
So some of them have been emphasizing more aspects of it than others.
Yeah.
I know she's a lot of guys are very attracted to her.
She's very good.
She's sexy, she's funny. She has that broken bird syndrome, and that she's bouncing back from a really horribly abusive relationship.
Yes.
So there's a part of me that wants to reach out and help her.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, she's definitely someone that, yeah.
I feel you can also relate to her because there's a lot of cases of that in today's society.
Oh yeah.
So I feel a lot of girls can relate to her.
Yeah.
So they have a severe case of Stockholm syndrome, kind of.
Yeah. Which only works if you have a story that emphasizes her trying to escape each other, which hasn't always been the case with Harley.
No, just recently actually, that they kind of.
Yeah, that became a big deal in the recent Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey movie. That was the whole theme of it. So Harley, unlike a lot of comic book characters, actually started out in the cartoons. Have you ever seen Batman the Animated Series?
I have.
Excellent, because
Yeah.
it's the best cartoon ever. Yeah. Harley has kind of a funny history in that she was created just to be in one episode.
Yeah.
They had a thing where there was a birthday party and they wanted a woman to jump out of a cage, so they invented a character. And then they rewrote the script, so that wasn't necessary anymore. It's funnier if Joker jumps out of the cage, you know.
Yeah.
But then they were stuck with a character they didn't know what to do with. She was literally there just to have someone for the Joker to talk to.
A companionship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was playing, her voice was by Arlene Sorkin, who's a very good actor. She'd been on a soap opera. And she brought the character to life with only a handful of lines.
Yeah.
And even that one episode where she didn't really do all that much, the audience, I really found myself liking her and wanting to know more about her. And she didn't appear in that many episodes of the animated series, but she wound up being a real hit every time she appeared. And they eventually started focusing episodes on her. And they make a list of the best Batman the Animated Series episodes. Harley-centric episodes are almost always the top of the list because everybody loves them.
It's entertaining.
Yeah, she's a fun character.
Yeah.
And I imagine she's a fun character to write and a fun character to play, too.
Definitely.
So Joker's Favorite was the first episode she appeared in. That was early in the first season. And at that time, they didn't really know she was going to go on and become a regular part of it.
Yeah.
So there's several Joker episodes where she's not there because those episodes were written before they knew she was going to be big time. Her best episode, in my opinion, two episodes that really stand out, apart from her first appearance. One of them is Harley and Ivy. Have you ever seen that one?
Not that I remember because it was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. It's available on DVD.
But I do know the
You
story.
can probably stream it.
Yeah, I do know the
Soon
story.
you can have episodes beamed into your skull. No, sorry.
Actually, it's true though.
I'm sure they're working on that.
Yeah.
No, Harley and Ivy was the one that established the relationship between the two female villains.
I do know the story behind the both of them, but I just don't know the episode.
Yeah, Harley and Ivy. Ivy sees Harley as someone that needs help, and she does what most of us want to do is give her a hand. And Ivy, in almost every version of their relationship, is always very supportive, very helpful. She's always there when Harley needs her. And they have kind of an odd relationship because Ivy is, in a sense, part human and part plant. And I think that being with Harley kind of grounds her. Harley is so human that she makes Poison Ivy more human by being with her. And on the other hand, Ivy almost always winds up being a conscience for Harley. Harley can go too far really easily. She always needs someone to pull her back. And that tends to be the job that Ivy usually has in most versions of their relationship.
I feel like every crazy girl needs her one
Yeah, and that was obviously what Ivy is for Harley, but
Yeah.
exactly how close they were, whether they were just friends or more than friends, was kind of left up in the air. It was a children's cartoon after all. But that became one of the problematic things as Harley went on to be translated to other mediums. The best Harley Quinn episode was her final appearance on the cartoon. It was called Harley's Holiday. You familiar with that one?
I am.
Yes. She gets out of Arkham Asylum and she's declared certifiably sane. She actually has a piece of paper with the word sane stamped on it. So she's finally free and can start her new life. And of course, things go disastrously wrong. She tries to buy a dress, and she does buy a dress. However, the clerk fails to take off the little magnetic alarm thing, so it sounds the alarm. And then she hears the alarm, and mall security comes after her, so she runs away from them, and then real cops come after her. Then she kidnaps someone, and the army gets involved. And before you know it, there's like tanks rumbling through the streets.
Yeah, just because of one little thing.
Everything escalates really wildly out of control. And Batman spends the whole episode chasing after her, trying to calm things down. It's a funny episode, it's fast-paced, it's really brilliant. And at the end of the episode, she gets arrested, but they let her go because the person who was kidnapped has brought the charges, so she realizes what was going on. And in the end, Harley just says, that she just had a really bad day.
Yeah.
And Batman hands her the dress that she bought in the store. And says, that's okay, I had a bad day once too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
It's like touching.
It is, it really gets you. As much as he is down on evil, he recognizes there's something in Harley that's not that bad.
She's still semi-sane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he can't be the one who's always there for her, because it's his job to do other things. So Harley was huge in the cartoon, and it was obviously she was destined for the big time, if anyone really knew what to do with the character. So she popped up in the comic book. She became the first cartoon character to cross over to the comic books. This is a collection of her early comic book appearances. It has a gorgeous cover by Alex Ross.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I used to have a poster of that in my room.
Yeah, it was such a nice image that they used it for Suicide Squad. For like 2 seconds, the characters pose like this. Even though Harley doesn't look like that for the entire rest of the film.
Yeah.
He was introduced into the comic book and sort of brought into Batman's family and so forth, his little circle of acquaintances. And in this one, she was more or less still with the Joker. Her definitive origin story was done by her creator, Paul Dini, who wrote the first Harley Quinn stories and the best. And that was Mad Love.
Yeah, I've read that.
Yeah, my copy of Mad Love is checked out right now, which is why I haven't every production. It's basically the origin story. It's the definitive one. Every other origin kind of pales next to this one. It's by her creator, Paul Dini. It goes through how she went from being, Dr. Harleen Quinzel, a brilliant psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, to being this crazy person because she fell for the wrong man. Who basically, she allowed him to destroy her life.
Yeah, definitely.
And this exists both as an episode of the TV series, and it's also been a graphic novel, and it's actually been a prose novel too, written by Dini. So you can get it in 3 different forms, and they're all really good. She was so popular that they wound up putting her to her own comic book series, which came out in 2002. It's the early Harley series. She's still dressed like she was in the cartoon. But at that point, they hadn't thought of any other costumes for her. Really.
But it fits her. That's what
It
everyone
fits her,
knows
yeah.
her as. It's a good thing.
It is. It's a good, simple outfit. But right away they started running into problems because on the animated series, there's a limit to what the Joker could get away with. The Joker never really murdered anyone on the animated TV series, so they wouldn't allow murder to happen. However, the Joker in the comic books has killed hundreds of people, many of them in really awful, horrible ways. So if you establish Harley as being the Joker's hench person through any phase of his career, then Harley is personally responsible for killing hundreds of people. And that's a little problematic. So the writers weren't sure how to handle that. They played around with it several different ways. At least some of the writers thought that she might be so out of touch with reality she wasn't aware she was really killing people, which makes her completely insane and undercuts a lot of her character. She was also hanging around with Ivy during this period, but they couldn't decide what kind of relationship that they had. So Ivy pops up and they're best friends, but they're not really sure where to go from there. These stories are good. There's nothing bad. They've all been reprinted now because she's so popular. All of this stuff is coming back into Quinn. So they're good stories, but they're not great. And it was eventually canceled. In the last issue of the series, she actually ejected herself back into Arkham to have them take a look at her, because she realizes how out of touch she is with what's going on.
Like I'm going a little.
Yeah, it was kind of a sad, ending, but she didn't stay away for long because they kept using her again and again. Paul Dini came back to write the Harley and Ivy miniseries. He teams them up again. And again, the relationship is kind of ambiguous, but as always, Ivy is the one who has the plans and tries to make everything run on an even keel, and Harley is just wildly out of control.
Me too.
Yeah. Ivy has a plan for world conquest that's absolutely foolproof, except, for her sidekick.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Pinky and the Brain sort of situation for that series. Yeah. But that's a really good one. Again, it's written by Paul Dini. And I think at some point, DC or someone must have realized that Paul Dini writes the best Harley Quinn.
Oh yeah.
So they hired Paul Dini, who was away from animation for a while and working at DC, to do Gotham City Sirens.
I've never read that one.
It was a great series. I highly recommend it. Dini left the series after about a year. This one collects all the Paul Dini stories.
Okay.
Without him, another writer took over and flew it right to the side of the mountain. It just completely crashed and burned without Paul Dini at the helm. I have no idea why or how that happened, but it happened. However, the early stories are fantastic.
Okay.
Basically, what happens is it teams up Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, and Catwoman, who are the three top villains.
Oh yeah.
And three of the top female characters at DC Comics. Catwoman has stolen a bunch of money from Hush, one of those long stories.
Yeah.
She winds up rendering Hush penniless, and she splits the money between different female villains. And she and Harley and Ivy wind up sharing an apartment, and they become roomies. And they hang out together, they order pizza, they commit a few crimes. All three of them are at a stage in their life where they're trying to reassess their value. So there's no
Casual girl's name with them.
exactly. So there's no plotting to rob a bank or anything.
Yeah.
Everything we do is always Ivy wants to stop deforestation in South America. So Thea's like, yeah, let's go to South America. That kind of thing.
Spontaneousness.
Yeah. They're not under the compulsion to act like supervillains in this one. So you actually get to see them as people hanging out together. And the fact that they share an apartment creates a bond between them. That's lasted through several different itinerations of continuity.
Yeah.
It's just natural for them to hang out together. I wrote a role-playing game, in fact, set in Gotham City, and I established that the apartment that they own in Gotham City Sirens, that Catwoman still pays the rent on it. So any of them can crash them in the evening.
See, the thing is, though, I've never associated Catwoman with them. I've never seen that. I've never even heard of that graphic novel before. So I only just ever knew Poison Ivy and Harley.
They're friends, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Ivy and Harley definitely have a close relationship.
Yeah.
Catwoman isn't as close, but
Yeah.
they share an apartment. There's a really funny issue of Harley Quinn's comic book called Harley's Road Trip, in which Ivy and Catwoman drive cross country in a camper, and hysterical hijinks ensue is what all I can say.
That's funny.
It was a very funny comic. I loved it. People who remember that the three of them hung out together, writers will still make callbacks to that. There's an issue of Birds of Prey in which a disease was killing all the men in Gotham City.
Yeah.
And so Batgirl gathered together all the female heroes and villains to join forces. And immediately, Ivy and Harley approach Catwoman and say, okay, so what's really going on here? They're afraid they're being tricked so they could be arrested by Batgirl. She's like, no, it's legit. The fact that they come to her rather than anybody else in Gotham shows the bond that they have.
Yeah, because Catwoman played both sides.
Yeah.
So.
In the comic books right now, they've established that she and Batman are an item. They've talked about getting married. They decided not to get married, but they're still together.
Okay.
They just have their own separate lives. When Sarah Maas wrote her Catwoman origin story, as they're starting out, it shows a version of her training. It's a totally different continuity. It's not set in any version of the characters that you've seen.
Yeah.
But she still runs into Harley and Ivy, also early in their careers. And she works with the two of them. So the three of them still team up in several different continuities. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. It makes it seem so much more like real characters. However, they're not real characters, they're comic book characters. And bad things happen to comic book characters.
Yeah.
So a while ago, DC got the brilliant idea to cancel all the comic books and start them all again with new number ones.
Okay.
Because number ones always sell. And that gave them a chance to springboard a whole new continuity. Except people who are fans of the comics, who are fans of the characters as they originally were, and people who weren't fans of the old characters didn't want to buy the new characters either.
Yeah.
So they began Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman all with new number ones, and not that many people cared. But most of the characters stayed more or less the same.
Yeah.
Batman was totally unchanged.
Batman's never really ever changed though.
Well, the DC mandated younger heroes because they thought that the movie was going to go with younger actors to play the roles. And then they hired the not young anymore Ben Affleck to play Batman anyway. So coming up with a 25-year-old Batman was kind of pointless, DC. And so even though Bruce Wayne had been Batman for less than 10 years in the continuity, he had still trained 3 Robins.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake were all Robins. Go figure. It just happens that way sometimes. Yeah. Comic books. The good thing is, though, that Harley Quinn got a big push, because by this time it's obvious she's going to be big, because between iterations of Harley, the Batman Arkham games came out. Now, the Arkham games were hugely popular. Some of my favorite computer games.
Yeah.
Have you seen them or
Yeah.
played them?
Yeah.
Yes. They're really well done. They took a lot of the concepts from the animated series. They hired Paul Dini as a writer again, Paul Dini. They had Kevin Conroy as Batman, Mark Hamill as a Joker. They actually had Arlene Sorkin come back to do Harley Quinn for the first Arkham one. She's replaced by Tara Strong and the others. And even though it's definitely not in the animated continuity, it still feels like it's a part of that. Someone said it looks almost like an R-rated version of the old cartoon.
Honestly, yeah.
Now, weirdly, even though Harley doesn't actually do that much, she's there, and she's really sexy. Many people who've never seen the cartoon and wouldn't watch a cartoon in a million years suddenly saw her and became obsessed with her.
It's because they took her original outfit and kind of just times it by 20.
Well, that was the first time they really changed her out of the leotard, you know. So she now had a range of clothing she could wear that made her more interesting. They definitely sexualized the character a lot more.
Definitely.
She was always sexy, but after the Batman Arkham games,
Yeah,
she was a real sex bomb all of a sudden. And that would kind of, come back and bite them in the rear at some point in the future. But meanwhile, they had a huge untapped audience of Harley Quinn fans out there they wanted to take advantage of.
Yeah, definitely.
So when they made the newer version of Harley Quinn, she still has like 90% of her origin is the same.
Okay.
But the big change they made was that in this one, the Joker tosses her in a vat of acid so that her skin is bleached white like his.
Yeah.
In the original Harley Quinn, she was just wearing makeup.
Oh, I didn't.
Yep. If you read the early issues, she can wipe the makeup off and still pass as an ordinary person. In Batman the Animated Series,
Yeah.
she spent a lot of time just as Harley with her hair and pigtails and that kind of thing. But in the new one, she definitely is doused with the same acid that Joker was dipped into.
Yeah.
So she has the bleached skin all the time. The crazy hair, as everyone mentioned. And so that definitely does 2 things to her. It cuts her off from humanity and being normal. So in the cartoon series, she could still be normal if she had to. In the early comic books, she could always pass as normal.
Yeah.
She could always have a normal life if she had to. But in the new 52, in the new continuity, she couldn't. She's always cut off. And more importantly, she lost a lot of agency, as they say.
Yeah.
In the early continuity, it was her decision to toss her old life down the drain and become a supervillain.
But she did that for Joker.
She fell in love with the Joker, and obviously he influenced her. But she's the one that did it on her own. It was her decision, good or bad, that she has to live with.
Yeah.
And the new one, the Joker forces her hand. She can't go back. She'll always be Harley Quinn now. She'll always be his Harley, no matter what. And that makes her darker and more tragic, but it also takes away her freedom of choice. She loses her agency in the whole origin story.
Yeah.
And while that should have damaged her character in a lot of ways, in some ways it didn't. And she also got stuck in the Suicide Squad, which was
It was good. I liked it.
well, it was good and bad.
It had its moments.
Yeah. She was put in Suicide Squad front and center in the comic book for the new 52. She had actually never been a part of the Suicide Squad before.
Yeah.
The squad had been around for a decade, and she'd never been a part of it before. And all all of a sudden she was like right in the center of it. This is the cover of the graphic novel, the first set of the new Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's this is the outfit she would have in the comic books for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
The Suicide Squad she's put in the front and center of both the front and the back cover because she's the big draw in the book. There's no question about that. She's the one you want to see. And they obviously have an emergency that's like so dire she has to rush out of Belle Reve without putting her clothes on because she's wearing something that looks a lot like panties, and she has a bodice that she hasn't bothered to tie in front, which looks really dumb.
Yeah.
And then particularly since Amanda Waller sends them into a place that has snow on the ground in the very first story, and she's not even wearing a coat.
Mm-mm.
So it's like, what? But this definitely sexualized her to like the nth degree.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I don't even know how she can bend over with those pants on.
See, anything's possible in comic books, though. You can't really think
Comic book physics, yeah. So that was kind of sad, and that obviously inspired the movie Suicide Squad. Now you saw Suicide Squad?
I
movie?
did.
What did you think of it?
I liked it for the most part. There were certain like characters that I didn't really like as much, but for the most part, it was pretty good.
I enjoyed it. Again, I love comic books and I love movies, and I'm perfectly aware that movies are a very different medium. You can't imitate a comic book directly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Marvel movies, which I love to pieces, many of the movie characters are very different from their comic book counterparts. They just have to be. So the fact that they made changes to the Suicide Squad doesn't bother me that much. But some of the changes just didn't work.
Yeah. What do you think?
First of all, I thought the director or the writer really needed like more time.
Mm-hmm.
The script was written by the director who wrote it in 6 weeks, which in Hollywood is like a really fast turnaround time.
Yeah.
They couldn't decide on the tone, how funny they wanted it to be. So supposedly somewhere in a vault in Hollywood there were different cuts of the film, one of which was really dark and one of which was wacky and zany. And we wound up seeing a version that had scenes from both of those stuck together. And some of the movie looks exactly like scenes stuck together from different movies.
Yeah.
There's things that worked in it and things that didn't work. The treatment of Harley, I understand that she's gorgeous and she's a big selling part of the movie, but you don't have to zoom in for close-ups of her butt. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, that happened a lot.
Yeah, although Margot Robbie is extremely attractive and she's wearing a skimpy outfit, that's been established. The audience knows that already. You don't have to show close-ups of her butt. But in his infinite wisdom, the director decided to go that route. And supposedly, he regrets not making it more of Harley's story. Now, the weird thing is, in the film, he makes it perfectly obvious, as writer and director, that he thinks Joker and Harley belong together. The entire backbone of the film is Joker and Harley being a couple.
Yeah.
We see the flashback to her origins, we see Joker moving heaven and earth to break her out of Belle Reve and track her down. He steals an army helicopter, survives a flaming helicopter crash.
Even at the end of Suicide Squad.
The very end, he shows up to free her.
Yeah.
So the deep and abiding love between Harley and Joker is like the crux of the movie.
Yeah.
And yet every version of Harley that works has her leaving the Joker. You really can't make that relationship not toxic.
No.
He's the frickin' Joker. In almost any version of the Joker, he's not capable of feeling emotions like that. He's just not. He's a total sociopath. He can pretend to have emotions. He can fake it really easily.
Yeah, definitely.
Serial killers are often like that.
Yeah.
But he won't really feel anything. For her to go through all that to hunt her down and free her from prison is so unlike any version of the Joker that we've seen.
Yeah.
I didn't like all the choices they went with the Joker. He didn't scare me.
No. He was more of like a sex appeal too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made him more sexy than scary.
They tried to make him sexy. I mean, I shouldn't judge, but compared to previous versions of the Joker that we've seen, Heath Ledger's version of the Joker is still not in the books as being, the best.
Definitely.
And they knew they were coming off that. They knew there'd be comparisons,
Yeah.
but they didn't really live up to Joker's potential. I don't even think he was as good as Jack Nicholson in the old Michael Keaton movie, honestly. Because Nicholson is such a fine actor; he can bring almost any character to life. So the Joker and Harley thing was really painful. I hated the way they treated Amanda Waller. In the DC Comics, Amanda Waller is one of the strongest, toughest characters in the DC Comics. She can outwit anyone, she can outthink anyone.
Yeah.
When Batman went out to the Suicide Squad to shut them down, she totally like ran rings around him. He was never able to actually stop the Suicide Squad in the comics. They still existed even after he tried to close down the prison.
Wow.
She's good. At one point someone said about her, Amanda Waller's backup plans have backup plans. And yet, every single idea she has in the movie is terrible.
Yeah.
You wonder why the government hired this woman to run this squad of supervillains. Because they were just coming off of Batman v Superman, so the idea of Superman being a menace is hanging in the air. And so at one point, Waller makes a speech about how we'll need some kind of response if Superman gets out of control. And I'm like, wait a minute. You've got Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, Harley Quinn.
El Diablo.
Yeah, El Diablo. Okay, at least he has actual powers. But the point is, these are people that Batman has beaten. But your master plan is you pit them against Superman?
Yeah, that was
It
really
was a
weird.
terrible plan. Oddly, no one in the room tells her what a terrible plan it is.
Mhm.
And her only agent that has really great powers is the one that she has zero control over and can never trust, who, surprised, gets out of control and goes on a rampage almost immediately. In fact, the entire film, and the theme of it is really Amanda Waller making horrible mistakes and then trying to desperately like make up for them.
Mhm.
When they had to rescue someone from inside this hot zone, it was kind of suspenseful for a little while. And then you realize the person they're after is Amanda Waller, who was cut off behind enemy lines, so to speak, when her own plan blew up in her face.
Yeah, definitely.
Even their attempts to make her a badass, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, and then at the end she's kind of begging for scraps from Batman. At least she knows who Batman is, which is a good thing. She should. But she never had that sense of power that she had in the comic book. She was never allowed to have that.
Yeah.
In the comic book, she's also a very heavy woman. And she's an older woman. She's a grandmother in the comic books.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
So deliberately created the antithesis of every hot young chick that fills the comic books.
Yeah.
And she was still the biggest badass, in the DC universe.
Mhm.
She's even very good when she's used in the cartoons too. She pops up in Justice League and yeah. I thought Suicide Squad was really a failed attempt.
Now that I know all these little things, I never really noticed that.
Critics pointed out right away that in the first 15 minutes of the movie they play 18 songs.
Really?
Yeah. You notice they do. 18 songs, you play at least a few bars of them in the first 15 minutes of the film. And every character gets 2 introductions.
Mhm.
The introduction is the prisoner Belle Reeve and a flashback to them being arrested.
Yeah.
So we've already met this guy. Why do we need a second introduction to him?
Yeah.
Your badass characters only need to show their badass once to convince the audience if you've got a good writer and a good actor.
Yeah. How did you think Will Smith's doing that?
He was okay. His problem as an actor, first of all, I love seeing him play in an ensemble cast. It wasn't a Will Smith movie. I think every actor who's really big should do that, just play a smaller part in another film.
Definitely.
And that was good to see him do that. That being said, he still mostly played Deadshot like Will Smith.
Yeah.
Like Will Smith, who's a really good shot. He does have some good scenes.
Okay.
Deadshot. Deadshot in the comic books, his big shtick is that he's a hired killer with a death wish.
Mhm.
And he can kill anyone except Batman, who always beats him.
Yeah.
No matter how carefully he plans it, Batman always beats him. And that's become kind of his thing that he can't get over. He has his daughter, who's the one love of his life, which the movie did capture.
Anything for her.
Yeah, the problem is though, in the end of the movie, she was sitting there planning an assassination with him.
Yeah.
He's drawn her into his life of murderous bloodshed.
And then he got taken away to go back to jail.
In the comic books, keeping her away from his horrible life is his main motivation.
Mhm.
He doesn't want her to be a part of that. He wants her to be better than that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Deep down, he thinks he's not that bad a guy. He started out trying to be a vigilante like Batman, but he couldn't stop killing people. And Batman, of course, had to shut him down.
Mhm.
And the one scene I really, really liked was where Rick Flag sort of sneers, "You're nothing but a serial killer who takes credit cards." And you see Will Smith getting really defensive. It's because
Yeah.
Flag has hit him right where it hurts. Deep down, he really is just a murderous thug.
Yeah.
There's nothing cool or special about Deadshot. He's just a thug who shoots people in the head. And he doesn't want to admit that. He wants to believe he's somehow better than that.
He wants to think that he's actually doing something good.
Yeah, and that's why in the end, having him be the first one to say, all right, let's go, saddle up, basically,
Yeah.
that's not a bad thing to do. In the same way, Harley doesn't necessarily want to be, Harley, the
Yeah.
person that she is. One of the scenes that really worked, and they used it in the trailer for the movie, the excellent trailer, in which they're in the bar getting drunk, and Harley successfully psychoanalyzes every other person in the room. Immediately calls out their strengths and weaknesses because she knows she's a trained psychiatrist as well as being kind of in that job herself. And in the comic books, they've said several times that although Harley acts crazy and appears crazy, she's almost always the smartest person in the room.
Well, yeah, I don't know, I feel like she uses her skills to her advantages. So I feel like with the psychiatrist stuff, when she has that, then she's like set.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the kind of strength that Harley Quinn should have, but not every writer has noticed that. This is so awesome and continue to do a part 2.
Yes.
Yes, we definitely have more to talk about. We haven't got to the recent Harley Quinn movie, and there's still a whole stack of comic books I haven't even talked about yet.
Yeah.
Harley Quinn there's so much to cover.
And
So join us next time for Book Talking Harley Quinn Part 2.